topic for today is running a successful API program, best practices, challenges, and pitfalls. If you had attended yesterday's keynote sessions, there was an awesome talk by Jonathan Pearl from BNY on API first approach. So it is a practical, real-world example of what an API program is about. So I just wanted to mention that thing, so in case if you had attended, you'll be able to relate what I'm going to talk today. So APIs is the main subject, right? So APIs are everywhere, and API definitely enables modernization. There's no doubt about that. And there's actually no need to define what is an API. It is such a popular topic all these days and over the years. But to set the stage for how important APIs are, let's quickly understand what is the state of APIs today. And F5 has done a study which indicates there are about 200 million APIs in use today. And they estimate on an aggressive basis this number to grow more than 1 billion by 2030, which is, in another word, to say that in the next 5 years, there'll be 4 times more APIs to be created than what is in use today, which is phenomenal, right? Phenomenal growth. And also, if you see on this side graph, this bar graph, from Postman has done a survey which states that APIs are being used across many sectors, not just in technology, but in healthcare, in public sector, in education, and you name it, right? So which is also an indication of how impactful APIs are over the years and the years to come as well. And when it comes to who works with APIs, and in general, if we look at APIs, we think that APIs are something to do with developers, which is still the case. You see 71% of the users are still developers, but you also see executives, solutions architects, system architects, directors, managers. They all use APIs, which is, again, a very good indication of how impactful APIs are for businesses. And this talk is about an API program, right? And why do we need an API program? So we need an API program because we know APIs are important, but that also could result in something called an API sprawl, which is the unprecedented explosion of APIs done in a chaotic way. So you can end up with that mess if you don't have a proper API program and API strategy. So that's one reason why you need to have an API program. And APIs need to support a business's long-term strategy. It's not just something that you do once and then be done with it in about a year or two. We have to have a long-term strategy when it comes to APIs and how impactful that would be for businesses. And you need to also have this structured progression. You just can't just go about converting everything for APIs. You need to have a proper plan on what needs to be converted as an API. So that structured progression needs an evolution. So you need an API program to get away with it. And also it needs to align with the organizational mission. And what's the use of having APIs if that doesn't help the organization, right? So this is why you need an API program. So in an API program, it should be good if an organization adheres or come up with a maturity model. And this is just a framework that I think of. You don't have to follow a framework like this, but important point is you need to come up with your own maturity model, which is to say, where do you start and where do you want to be? Right? So in this model, basically, I defined 5 different stages, where the first stage is about data exchange, second is about integration, and then collaboration stage, value realization stage, and finally, it needs to support the business transformation in the end. But it's a journey, right? You don't have a destination on this subject. You keep on improving, you keep on evolving, but the business transformation is the end goal, end of the day. Right, so to start off, we normally see different types of APIs in use, right? So APIs you can categorize as private APIs, partner APIs, and public APIs. Of course, private APIs are for internal use. You don't expose that to external entities or partners or public to use those APIs. It's just within your organization. Partner APIs are designed for external partners, your B2B channel partners. And the public APIs are, of course, available for public use, but doesn't mean that those are just open for everyone. You may have guardrails to use those APIs, but it's available to use for public. And again, if Postman has done a survey which indicates that there are about 56% of APIs are private internal APIs, which is obvious, right? And 26% partner APIs and 18% public APIs. So all types of APIs have good distribution. As a strategy, it's good to start with private APIs. If you don't have an API program in place, it's good to start with private APIs. Why? Because if you don't have an API thinking, these private APIs will help start the API thinking for you, and it helps build the foundational capabilities because you break down your business logic into APIs, and you will be able to reuse these things in your future development. And it definitely fuels the modernization. Again, there's no doubt about that. And one important thing about private APIs is it allows you to experiment, right? And make mistakes, which is fine. Because if you open up to your partners or public APIs, that could tarnish your reputation if you do not do it in the right way. So your experience suffers. That will probably tarnish the image of the company. So you may better off start with private APIs to do those experiments. And it will definitely reduce the time to market because multiple teams can work independently on different APIs. That's one advantage of having this microservices architecture where different teams can work on different programming languages independently, so which in another way reduce the time to market. And it definitely improves internal collaboration as well. So now I want you to follow those 5 stages that I mentioned. So it's just a framework. So the stage 1 is on data exchange stage. Obviously, you can start with the private internal APIs, and you have a number of programming languages like Ballerina, Node.js, or Go, or Java, and whatnot. You can use those to create your APIs, your microservices. At this stage, you will mostly be focused on data exchange. And you will only have about a simple API lifecycle, basically starting with the implementation, testing, and then deploying into multiple environments. And API developers will be there, and definitely API consumers. Most probably these are your internal applications because these are private APIs. And at this juncture, you will be doing iterative development and definitely not sophisticated deployment mechanisms. You will be doing manual deployment. One thing to note is you may be at any stage on that maturity model, right? It is just a framework. This framework, I define this as something that you could be having a manual deployment, but in your case, you might be having that automated deployment to start with, which is great if that is the case, right? And at this stage, typically, you may be only having this SOAP or REST API types or architectural styles. Again, if your organization is way ahead in this program, you might be using other types of APIs as well. And at this stage, you may not have like proper security or traffic control because you're doing experimenting at this stage, internal APIs, and that also means you don't have a proper API management and maybe minimal documentation to start with, which is fine to start with your API program, right? And at this stage, if you look at what are the best practices you can have, obviously you need to identify in your organization's systems of records what common data extractions and what transformations, what loading you can do, and do those things so that you can reuse it. And obviously you need to avoid the API sprawl, which I mentioned earlier on, because you should not just be going full out on defining and creating your APIs for every little thing, but you need to have a proper strategy in place. And you have to design your APIs for reusability and scalability earlier on, right? So that is very important because if APIs are being created and nobody is using it or reusing it, that's not a proper strategy, right? So you need to have that in place. And definitely other thing is quantifying the benefits of data exchange. So sometimes in organizations, even business executives, they don't understand the importance of doing APIs. If something is working fine, why change? question comes in. So you need to quantify, like if you start with an API program, think about how you can quantify the benefit. And if you can show that benefit to your executives, and you need to have that executive buy-in to keep progressing on this API program. The stage 2 is about integration stage. So integration is also a very important aspect in an API program, right? And at this stage, you will have a lot of systems in your organization, systems of records being interconnected for doing integration. And at this stage, you will have enterprise architects also joining in, and you will possibly have some automated mechanism to do the deployments, CI/CD and so forth. And you will have the right architectural styles, not just the SOAP or the REST API that I was talking about. Maybe you bring in GraphQL, WebSockets type of APIs, gRPC type of APIs, and you may focus on distributed domain-driven design at this stage to segregate your APIs into business domain level APIs. And that will help structure your organization as well, because organization structure teams can be centered around these APIs. So that will help there. And at this stage, you might also have design time governance in place. So design time governance means somebody will have to do some guardrails when it comes to how somebody develops this API. So you might have design documents and coding standards, might be doing it in a manual way, right? That's fine. So API architecture styles, you understand. So this image that I picked it from LinkedIn, and SOAP and REST, but you also have GraphQL, gRPC, WebSocket. The idea is at integration stage, you should use the right architectural style, not just restrict yourself to SOAP or REST. Pick the right one that suits your integration scenario, right? And at this stage, some best practices you can follow is, obviously, you need to have a good build pipeline and a CI/CD, because no manual deployment, building help you move forward with this API program. So you need to think early on automating that. And obviously, when you have integration, means you have to have different teams working, different systems integrating. You need to promote your APIs internally. If internal teams are not using your APIs, will external people be using it? So that's an important question to ask, right? So you need to do maybe talks, enablements, hackathons, trainings, and whatnot, those kind of things within your organization to promote API use. So that is an important aspect in an API program. And also, treat your internal stakeholders as customers. Don't think, okay, this is my friend using this API, so I can design it the way that I like, or without proper standards, and I can just help him out do the integration with the API. So treat them as customers. That's very important. And then probably use some standardized data formats that's suitable for your scenario. It could be XML, it could be JSON, or any other format. That's fine. But you need to have some sort of a format in place. The stage 3 is about collaboration stage. So at this stage, you'll have to think beyond your organization, because collaboration helps businesses, especially when it comes to partners. They drive business, they bring in new businesses as well. So you need to make sure you do B2B integration and API management, B2B API management. So you need to expose these APIs now. Now it's not any more restricted to your organization, so it's not just an internal API. So this is where you might be bringing in an API management solution in, right? Where you have a developer portal, you have a publisher portal for you to define your facade APIs. As you can see, you have your backend API implementation, and now you bring in the facade layer to design, test, manage, and then publish it, or publish it as a prototype. So at this stage, you need to also have a proper comprehensive API documentation, because partner developers, partner application developers cannot reach to your developers, right? You need to have a proper documentation. Could be something that you make it available in the developer portal and so forth. And strong API security. You can't be thinking about API security too far late, right? So you need to make sure that is in proper order, because now you're exposing it to your partners. And because of that, you might be bringing in an identity access management solution for people to sign in, to have strong authentication, and developers also need to have that thing, and that is also applicable for APIs. And obviously, because you're exposing your APIs to partners, your APIs need to have a clean experience layer or experience API. And also, at this stage is probably where you will be thinking of where should you start, whether it should be code first, whether it should be contract first. Yes, more and more organizations are moving into contract first approach because that lets people start off early, get feedback early, and design your APIs later on. Because designing and implementing is only going to take a little while. What's most important is your experience layer at this stage. And then, yeah, so proper API lifecycle management is in order at this stage. So as a best practice, you need to make sure your sign-up process to your developer portal is hassle-free. If people are having difficulty in signing up, start utilizing or discovering your APIs, that's going to put down a lot of things, right? So you need to make sure your developer portal is as easy to use and easy to sign up and start working on. And at this stage, because partner APIs are the ones that you are focusing on, collaborate with the partners, right? Talk with them and understand what they want out of your systems of records, right? That's important. So it's not just you blindly go and create partner APIs as you want. You have to collaborate with partner API developers, partner business people to see what they want out of your systems, your APIs, right? So that is important to understand as a best practice at this stage. And introduce prototyping to get early feedback. So this is the fact that I mentioned, don't go about creating your APIs blindly, but prototype it, give feedback, get feedback from them, and refine it, and then go on to create your APIs. And at this stage, to make those APIs much more usable, you also need to think about introducing software development kits for different technologies like JavaScript, Java, and so forth, right? So why partner APIs are important? So partner APIs are definitely useful to help scale partner onboarding, definitely. And usually in a lot of organizations, they have a supply chain, right? They have to provide goods, services, and whatnot to your business, and they also rely on your business supply chain as well. So to continue in the business supply chain and to ease partners to manage their supply chain, it's important to have partner APIs. And definitely it helps partners build their customer-facing applications, and that could open up your businesses to enter into different markets, which you have challenges with, right? So that's going to be useful with partner APIs. And it also helps build trust with partners because a lot of organizations depend on partners to work along with them to grow their business. And we are coming into the stage 4, we have the value realization stage. At this stage, you are thinking of now going beyond partners and making your APIs available for public use. And at this stage, obviously, you have to have the best use of infrastructure because your APIs cannot fail. Your APIs need to perform well at this stage. And also, it cannot hurt you when it comes to cost-wise, right? So you have to make sure that you have proper cost savings at this stage. And organization and ecosystem-wise collaboration is obviously needed at this stage. And which also means at this stage you need to have a proper architecture. So at the integration stage I was talking about domain-driven design. Maybe you can go one step further in this case where maybe you could have something like a cell-based architecture, which I'll talk about in the next slide. And maybe at this stage you also you will include an iPaaS or an API SaaS product like what we announced in the last couple of days, WSO2's Devant, WSO2's Bijira. It's just an option, right? Because at this stage, you need to make sure that you do the right deployment and make sure that you do the cost savings and so forth. And maybe at this stage, you might also have multiple gateways, one running on-premise, one running in Kubernetes, one running in the cloud. So you have this hybrid deployment, all things thought through at this stage, and which also could bring in faster go-to-market at this stage. So cell-based architecture is a sort of an extension of the domain-driven design, but much more streamlined to contain your components. And these are individual pieces or independently deployable artifacts or entities in which you have microservices, data services, and stuff within a cell, and then you have clear boundaries on how north, south to east, west traffic flows through. So you may be employing these kind of best practices at this stage. So at the value realization stage, you should be making sure that you do aggressive API evangelization, because now you are making it available to the public use. And again, if nobody is using that APIs, that's a big red mark, right? And you need to make sure that you do aggressive API evangelization at this stage on your APIs. And you need to have a clean architecture for optimum resource utilization, as I mentioned, because making it to public means you need to serve it right, but at the same time, you need to make sure your costs and other factors are under control. And obviously, strong authentication and authorization for your portals and APIs are important, because at this stage, you cannot compromise security at all, because the APIs are available to the public to use. And obviously, it's easy to use experience APIs are important, because if you have all the other things checked right, but your APIs are difficult to use, adoption will become an issue for you, right? So that's important to consider in your API program. And last, and the final stage, is the business transformation. The end goal of any API program should be to transform your business, to modernize your business, right? And at this stage, you need to probably have an API marketplace just going beyond a developer portal, because now you might be having multiple API gateways, multiple API management solutions in use, so you have to have a consolidated API marketplace approach looked into. And collaborative community, at this stage you have a wider adoption, and a lot of people are talking about your APIs, and they are even giving feedback and utilizing it in their own applications in the best way possible, right? So that wider adoption is now achieved at this stage. And obviously, because of this wider adoption, you can maybe think of some revenue generation opportunities for your organization. So API monetization may come into the picture at this stage, and it depends on your business. Sometimes you don't want to do the monetization, but you have an opportunity there. And we were talking about AI, artificial intelligence, all along during this conference, right, in the last 2 days. At this stage, maybe you could bring in artificial intelligence into the picture, and where you can use it to design APIs, you can use it to implement APIs, you can use it to test, document, and even to create or generate SDKs. So these were all we discussed even in our Bijira. We have the functionalities to generate all these things. And in Choreo as well, Choreo and Devant, we have the capability to do AI-assisted development, right, with our tooling aspects. And at this stage, you also have a strong API governance. Now, the word governance, a lot of people think of that as a huge roadblock. But at this stage, maybe the API governance is assisted by artificial intelligence, making sure that you automate the governance aspects of developing and designing APIs, so that you relieve your important human resources to do useful work than just doing governance. And at this stage, robust observability is also important, because you need to measure how the APIs are being used, how those are generating revenue maybe to your organization. So those aspects require robust observability. And maybe because of that, you might have to bring in an internal developer platform, which is to say, go platformless, which is what our Choreo is about, right? And Devant is built on top of that. Bijira is built on top of that. And you see all what I discussed summarized in this. You start with a proper strategy. You have a business architecture. You have an application architecture. You build an API, go through a life cycle of API development, and then publish it, make it available in a marketplace, do observability, and have multiple environments running in different layers of, could be Azure, could be on-prem, could be AWS, and so forth, right? So And at this stage, you have AI in use, as I mentioned, and you have to do promoting of your APIs, do a wider API evangelism, have strong API governance, of course, automated, as I mentioned, and maybe automated billing for your monetization to create a revenue stream out of your APIs. An API program is not an easy ride, right? In the process, you may also have common challenges and pitfalls to face, right? So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation as well, one thing to note about or careful about is the API sprawl and technical debt. You shouldn't just go on and create these APIs just for the sake of creating it. And poor design could really affect your adoption as well. And inefficient integration. You might have the best experience API as possible, but if it takes ages to get a response back, right? Or having performance issues, in other words, could have problems with adoption. So inefficient integration could be a problem. This is where you have to choose the right architectural styles and so forth, right? So these could be resulting from inadequate planning, lack of governance, and obviously the weak strategy in your API program, right? And on the flip side, this all could cause adoption and collaboration issues, even internally. Internal resistance to use APIs within your teams can become a huge bottleneck for this API program. So internal resistance, and that could be addressed with proper training within your organization. So lack of training is again a problem. So if you don't do that, if you see that problem of resistance, think about doing trainings and hackathons and talks internally to your organization to get this API programming off the ground. And yeah, with all of this, you could still have other problems like limited market reach, and then weaker security, and obviously limited external adoption. You have a huge adoption within your organization, but still external adoption could face challenges. So these are the things that I want to touch on an API program. And as you can see, one important thing to make sure on the key takeaways on the talk is about a structured API program is needed to reap the benefits from your APIs. And you have to define a API program maturity model that suits your organization. What I present is just a framework, right? So you need to make sure that you come up with something that fits your organization. Start with private internal APIs if you're just starting off with the API journey, and choose the right API architectural model in the integration stage. That's important. And don't overlook partner APIs. That's an important aspect to business development. And APIs aren't just important technical aspects. Those are business value propositions. So consider APIs as products, not just technologies. That's an important aspect to understand. So ultimately, successful API programs can and should result in business transformation.